A team that I want to talk about before we move any further is Carolina, because we can't talk about the CDL this season without just absolutely praising what the Royal Ravens have been doing for the first 2 weeks of the season. They are officially 4-0. They are officially the number one team in the CDL, according to the tiebreaker, because they have a better map win loss than any other team in the league. And this was not expected by any means. We would probably expect, if any other team, to be, phased in that kind of category. And it's been the complete opposite. Carolina has been just really, really strong to this point. Um, and I think part of that in the growth process, I guess, is maybe we have to change our opinions of some of these, I guess, quote unquote aging players like Slasher, who I believe is the oldest player. I think we said on the last few podcasts, like the oldest player in the CDL. TJ, who's been around for a while. Vivid, who has been bouncing around a few teams and hasn't been able to stick with any of them. And then there's Gwen, who we expected to keep growing and to keep getting better. And I think he's been even better maybe than we thought at this point in the season. And as a result, they are 4-0 and going to be the number one seed in the first CDL minor. So, what have you made of Carolina's first few weeks of the CDL season? And do we owe an apology or anything to maybe Litigoat and what he's able to do with this kind of team?
I don't think we need to owe an apology. I mean, we definitely we brought up that point of potentially this being the last opportunity for some of these guys on Carolina. But I was gassing Vivid up on being excited about just seeing what he was capable of doing with an AR in his hand when there were the reports of Vivid potentially switching to that AR role. And I think that was there were just questions around all of the players outside of Gwyn really on this team, like Slasher. After the Boston stint last year, didn't compete, so he was off for the second half of the season last year. And then TJ played well on Carolina last year, but he also didn't start the year on Carolina. That was a major one qualifier pickup, and he stuck around from there, but obviously has some pre-existing chemistry with Gwen to at least stick around and build off of. And then Vivid, like I said, yeah, that was a question mark or a wild card, if you will, for in terms of the role switch for him and the play style we saw from him historically in previous seasons. So um, it was definitely just some question marks around this Carolina team, and I don't think people necessarily were expecting them to be a 4-0 team right now, especially with a matchup against Atlanta FaZe that, like we were just talking about not too long ago, a lot of people probably expected Atlanta to win that one on paper. I do think it's important to also just look at who Carolina played, because I know we talked about it first time around. Their first match obviously was against Vegas Falcons, and that was the Falcons' debut in the CDL. And they've also played Gentlemates, Atlanta FaZe, and then we'll talk about the Cloud9 match eventually too. But yeah, I mean, on paper, their toughest match there is whichever way you look at it, it's either against a struggling Atlanta FaZe or a Cloud9 team that was having issues with ping and whatnot in previous matches leading into this. So I guess you can pick your poison in terms of that, but it's not like the most grueling schedule that Carolina could have played. So I think that's going to be um, at least part of the conversation around this 4-0 start, not to take any credit away from what they've done, because obviously that's just it's great to see for those guys, and get off to this kind of start. It's sets you up for any hiccups along the way. Like we always talk about this as we get later into the seasons. Like there have been seasons in the past where teams miss out on champs by 10 points and stuff, and then you look back at some of the earlier moments in the season where it's like, oh, we had a winnable match early on against X team and we just fell flat, just choked, didn't show up. And it's like, if you're winning your matches early on, it only sets you up for potential future success. So especially for I've talked to Slasher a bunch in terms of interviewing him and stuff before. Like, I think he's a really smart player, and I think very highly of him. So I think this is uh, really great for him in terms of getting off to a start like this. And he's the type of player that can thrive off of that momentum, I feel like. And he's not going to be someone who, you know, will get complacent with a 4-0 start. He wants to win. That's always been what's driven him on whatever team he's been on in the past, and he's going to want to continue to succeed with this Carolina squad. So it's going to be exciting to see where they're able to take things from here. But I definitely do want to see them play against some of these other teams, and obviously we will eventually. But yeah, like I said, don't want to take any credit away from what they've accomplished so far, but I will like to see them square up against some of these other teams that we got playing well too.
Yeah, I think that is at least a point to be made, is that the 4 teams that they have played so far, they have 3 combined wins between them. Because you have 1-3 C9, 1-3 Phase, I think it's actually 2 wins between them, because I think LAG and Vegas are both 0-4. So like, obviously all 4 teams that they've played are not performing up to standard, or they're just not good. I guess is the way to put it right now.
Still early.
Yeah, but everybody has kind of like the struggling beginnings, and there's always going to be teams that start slow. I don't think we necessarily expected it to be C9 and Phase in particular, but that's how it went this season. But Carolina has made the most of it, and in a lot of ways they've kind of been dominant in some ways. Like they're 9-2, I believe, in respawn so far this season. 6-1 in hardpoint. Their only loss was against C9 in the opening hardpoint of their series today, and then they come back in the second hardpoint in nearly 100-point club C9. It was 250-105 in the second hardpoint, and they end up reverse sweeping that series. So like that stuff where some of the momentum can be broken, and then they're able to kind of get back on it and win those matches. That's very important. It's something that we didn't necessarily see from Carolina in the past, where they could beat up on some of the worst teams in the league, but even then they were not always the strongest, and they would let up those losses. And like you were mentioning, these kind of matches do matter in the end, because there might not be a big difference between 8th and 9th, or maybe Carolina will be higher, but you definitely want to be like maybe 5th instead of 6th, so on and so forth. So I'm really impressed by what Carolina's been doing. Way better than I thought. I expected them to be, fighting. I don't know exactly where the tier was, or where I had them in my tier list when we did the preseason power rankings. But I certainly didn't think that they would be 4-0 after week 2, or anywhere close to that. And they should be praised for that.
I will say too. I mean, I know we're not going through the matches as much, but
Mm-hmm.
just the first reverse sweep of the year, again, not
Yeah.
a huge deal or anything, but I think that just that makes me think a little, regardless of who it's against, like just early on, any team having the resilience to pull off a reverse sweep against a team that's already kind of punched you in the mouth for 2 maps. Not necessarily saying like those maps were blowouts, but like, and any team that goes up 2-0 or goes down 2-0 and then is able to respond by rattling off 3 maps in a row, that's just like a good sign, I feel like, because if you're able to do that at any point, it at least like it's in the back of your mind that you can do it, right? So like if Carolina gets to land at Major 1 and they're facing an 0-2 deficit, it's not like, oh shit, our tournament's over or whatever. It's like in the back of your mind you can do it on this particular game with this particular team. Obviously all those guys have had reverse sweeps on various teams and various COD games and wager matches, lands, etc. But just knowing, again, like reaffirming and just getting that confidence, I feel like is important. So that was good to see today too from them in particular.